everyone, I wish you all a happy Halloween, and I'm hoping you guys are staying in spirit by dressing up, going trick-or-treating, and most importantly, watching some scary movies. And in honor of Halloween 2020, I'm talking about one of my all-time favorite horror movie franchises, the It franchise. I mean, come on, there's no better way in my mind to celebrate Halloween than by discussing these two gems. Today, however, It and It Chapter 2 will be going head-to-head in the ultimate face-off. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can you compare these two movies when the general consensus is that It Chapter 2 is not as good as 2017's It? Well, personally speaking, I love both movies, and I think you can make the argument for either movie being the better of the two. So with that said, let's get right into It. No pun intended. It only makes sense to start with It from 2017. Originally, I was planning on breaking this versus up into multiple categories, awarding a movie points based on if it did better than the other movie in that section, utilizing categories like characters, story, how scary the movie is, etc. But I feel like picking out the positives and negatives of each film is a little bit easier. In 2017, It became one of the highest grossing R-rated movies of all time, and was a smash hit. People loved this film, and rightfully so. The opening scene when Georgie meets Pennywise at first seems harmless, but that quickly changes. Pennywise bites Georgie's arm off and drags him into the sewer. It's a tragic scene, but was directed wonderfully. The movie could not have opened any better. The next 30 to 40 minutes of It spends time developing the story's main characters, otherwise known as the Losers Club. They really could not have found a better cast of kids. This is spot-on casting at its finest. From Jaden Martell to Sophia Lillis to Finn Wolfhard to Jack Dylan Grazer, and so on and so forth, everyone glimmers on the screen. Keep in mind too, for most of these kids, it was their first big role, which is impressive in itself. The dialogue helps a lot too. The way the kids talk in the movie is how kids that age talk. For them, it's cool to use bad words. You can't tell me you weren't the same way when you were their age. As a whole, the movie nails it when it comes to its characters and casting choices. Which reminds me, Bill Skarsgård is masterful as Pennywise the Clown. In the film, Pennywise feels like a shape-shifting devil who stops at nothing to hunt down the town's innocents. He's everything maniacal and one of the most evil creatures in cinema history. Bill Skarsgård deserves all the world's praise. Another strong takeaway from It are the film's themes. A prominent message of It layered throughout is teamwork. As the film progresses, we begin to notice that strength in numbers is very important when facing off against Pennywise. The points of the film where our characters are most vulnerable include the beginning before the Losers Club formation, and close to the end of the movie after Richie and Bill get into a heated argument, causing the gang to go their separate ways for a little while. These are the moments Pennywise capitalizes on. But when the losers are working as a team, Pennywise is much easier to defeat. However, its biggest theme has to be overcoming your fears. The movie clearly illustrates that everyone has their own interpretation of what they find scary. For some of the characters, it's losing a loved one to tragedy. On the other hand, Beverly deals with domestic abuse, Eddie has a fear of germs, and Richie just can't stand those creepy clowns. But once the kids uncover Pennywise's strategy for luring prey into his sewer den, the losers know they must face their fears and fight the evil clown in what turns out as a great finale. Overall, the movie does a fantastic job with putting the audience in the same shoes as the kids. It can be horrifying. The thought of a shape-shifting clown is scary enough, but Pennywise using that ability against you, taking the shape of your worst nightmare, is even more frightening. One last thing to mention is how It transports you back in time to the 1980s. I get a surreal sensation while watching this movie. It's the same feeling I got when watching The Goonies for the first time. It is a movie that feels like it was made in the 1980s and remade for a modern day crowd. This is extremely difficult to pull off, but director Andy Muschietti gets the job done. Looking back, It is one of my top 5 favorite movies of 2017 and is one of the best films of the 2010s. The only issue I've had is how some scenes go a little too far with the film's grotesque imagery. Obviously the film is rated R and I'm all for it, but from time to time the movie gets a little too graphic for my liking. Besides that, It is an all-around great movie with top-tier acting, nail-biting sequences, fun scares, and themes all film fans can relate to. It Chapter 2 was the highly anticipated follow-up to the first movie, coming out 2 short years later. It's no surprise now that a lot of people did not like this movie upon release. face, especially critics. In comparison to the first movie, which landed an 85% on Rotten Tomatoes, It Chapter 2 currently stands at a 63% among critics. Listen, I get it. Chapter 2 is nearly 3 hours long. A movie of that length turns most casual viewers off, which is understandable. Me though, not really, considering there may never be a Chapter 3, it only makes sense to have a long sequel to flesh everything out. Jumping into the thick of Chapter 2, it's still a good movie, in my opinion great. It offers more scary sequences, a loaded cast, and pure entertainment. When discussing Chapter 2, people tend to leave out just how funny this movie is. Sure, the first film has its share of laughs, but Chapter 2 combines humor from the first movie with adult-like jokes that only an older audience will appreciate. Plus, it helps a lot that Bill Hader stars in the movie. So like the movie before, It Chapter 2 starts off in brutal fashion when Pennywise yet again kills another person. Of course, this isn't as good as the first film's opening, but it works in its own right and instantly sets the tone. Along with the death of one irrelevant character comes the death of a major character, Stanley, who, spoiler alert, kills himself when learning that Pennywise lives. Stanley realizes that if he returns to Derry, he'll hold the group back, so he takes his own life. It does suck we don't get to see all 7 of our losers reunited as adults, but at least the movie stays true to its source material. Expanding on the film's cast now, it's bigger and better than the first movie. Well, of course it's better because it has both versions of our characters as kids and adults. The newcomers to the It universe include James McAvoy, Jessica Chastain, Isaiah Mustafa, Jay Ryan, James Ransom, and as previously mentioned, Bill Hader. I said it in my initial review and I'll say it again. It's quite a treat having the likes of Hader and McAvoy in a movie like this. It's unheard of, and we probably won't see this type of role for either actor again anytime soon, if ever. I'll cherish Barry Berkman and Professor X playing roles in the It franchise for life because it's simply awesome seeing them here. What I also liked about It Chapter 2 is how the film dives deeper into Pennywise's origins. The details fascinate me, and I wish there were more. This is something the first film didn't really touch on, so with more information about Pennywise's backstory handed to the audience in Chapter 2, his character receives much added depth this time around. A huge complaint from many about Chapter 2 outside of the film's length is the level of horror. Okay, fine, Chapter 2 is not as scary, which is both good and bad in its own way. It's bad in the case that this is a horror movie, so people pay to be scared. But it's also good because I'm not the biggest horror movie fan. Does this mean the movie isn't scary at all? No, it does have some scary moments that all fans of horror praise, but since this movie focuses mainly on the adult versions of our characters instead, you never get a sense that they are afraid of Pennywise. They overcame their fears in the first movie, so it only makes sense for them to be less scared now. And because of that, the audience is no longer as scared as they were during the first film. Kids are more vulnerable to danger, and we get a great sense of fear from the kids in the first movie. Outside of those two things, Chapter 2 is similar to Chapter 1. To begin, Pennywise makes his presence known, the losers link up once again, they each have scary encounters with Pennywise, and an epic finale ensues. This might also be a hot take, but Chapter 2's finale is better than the finale in the first film from my point of view. I say this because at the end of the first movie, despite Pennywise's demise, we all know he's going to return again. In Chapter 2, Pennywise is defeated, and as far as we know, he's dead for good this time, supposedly. So there is more closure in the second movie between the losers and Pennywise. During the final battle, again spoiler alert, Eddie is killed, and this gave the movie a lot more emotion than I was expecting out of the sequel. I actually shed some tears in theaters watching this, so on an emotional level, Chapter 2 is better. Plus, every character has their story end the best way possible. A few small things to quickly point out before wrapping up. The bully from the first movie makes an appearance in Chapter 2, but was that 100% necessary? Maybe not. And if you recall from just a little ago, I did say that Chapter 2 is somewhat identical in terms of plot structure to the first movie. That's fine for the most part, but the sequence where our characters split up and encounter Pennywise one by one feels tacked on. Had you shortened that entire sequence, which is about a fourth of the movie, and erased any scene with the bully, you're now staring at a more concise movie. A movie that I bet would have fared better with audiences. Again, length is crucial for some people, and if your movie is too long, they'll check out about halfway through. With all of that out of the way, It Chapter 2 is the It movie that I can talk about more. There's more to say about Chapter 2 over Chapter 1 because it's a longer movie. There's nothing else to it. But while there is more to talk about in the sequel, there are more negatives too. That's what happens when you have a movie that's almost 3 hours long. It becomes overstuffed. You try to go bigger and better, but as many have said about Chapter 2, that doesn't always mean the sequel is going to be the better of the two. So yes, It and It Chapter 2 are pretty close, but as a result of having a few more problems in Chapter 2, I'm awarding 2017's It the winner of this versus. Of course though guys, if you also have something to share about It and It Chapter 2, let me know down below in the comments section. And what movie do you think is better? I'm curious to hear all of your thoughts. As always guys, if you are new to my channel, click the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and I hope you all have a fantastic Halloween.